University of Amsterdam, ISHZ, and we are hosting two Incasi researchers. And this afternoon, this hour, or a bit more than an hour, we will have two presentations in the Living Lab meeting. And Manuel will be the second speaker, and Maria will be the first one. You will get around 20 minutes, 25 minutes to have a discussion and questions directly after that. And to say something about Maria, maybe you can introduce yourself, but I will give a first step. You are from Sevilla. You are a graduate in sociology and political science, and you hold a PhD, assistant professor. And you do a lot about labor quality and the division of labor in a gender perspective. And I think in this line, you will do your presentation. Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm going to share the presentation, so wait a minute. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The title of my presentation is Who Does What? Gender Role in Domestic Labor Among Heterosexual Couples in Spain and the Netherlands. Well, the schedule is I'm going to do an introduction, explain the main goals, methodology, result, and some reflections. Well, why is it important to study the sexual division of domestic labor? The division of domestic labor is one of the explanatory factors behind the persistence of inequalities between women and men. Although the gender gap in the distribution of household tasks has decreased in recent years, the difference in time spent is far from reaching a scenario of shared responsibility and equality. To explain this division, the literature distinguishes three theoretical main approaches. The first one is called specialization. Becker argues that the family is an harmonious unit with a specialization of roles aimed at maximizing well-being. The man's role is to bring the salary, while the woman is to take care of the household. In this view, inequality and conflict don't exist. Saraceno was a pioneer in criticism analysis that viewed the family unit as a harmonious space, arguing for the need to address the power relationships that are reproduced within the household and that can explain the traditional division of role in domestic settings. On the other hand, the relative resources theory is based on the logic of rational action and focus its analysis on identifying which individual factors influence the distribution of household tasks between women and men. This research emphasizes understanding how occupation, salary, education level, and other variables impact negotiations regarding time use and the division of domestic and public responsibilities. Who should dedicate more time to each sphere? This theory doesn't consider that men and women don't have the same access to resources. Additionally, research has shown that when women earn more money, in fewer cases, they still do more housework than men, indicating that this theory cannot explain the persistence of this inequality. The theory of gender expectations might provide a possible explanation. The concept of doing gender introduces a perspective where gender is performed, meaning that men and women play their roles based on society's gender expectations. These expectations guide women's behavior to do at home and men's behavior to don't do at home, leading them to adopt different resistant strategies. Expectations lead women to take on most of the housework, fulfilling the traditional role assigned to them by society. This reinforces the gender division at home. Other different approaches are also identified depending on the research question. Time use study focus on the sexual division of housework based on the time each partner dedicates to household tasks. While these studies are important, they don't provide information about the patterns or profiles that govern this different investment of time. Power and conflict is another line of research. It's a research on the division of domestic labor must be linked to the analysis of power relations in couples, as gender inequalities cannot be dissociated from power dynamics. According to Davis and Greenstein, the ongoing interesting study in domestic tasks lies in the fact that they have become a tool for understanding the relationship between gender and power in heterosexual couples. As Sarah Berg said, household tasks are not the only things produced at home, since the home is a factory of gender, a factory for reproducing inequalities related to gender. The key to studying the private sphere of the sexual division of domestic labor lies in the fact that this sexual division has implication in the public sphere in terms of disadvantages for women due to the specialist assignment of roles. We want to emphasize the relevance of studying the allocation of domestic work in heterosexual couples, as the assignment of gender roles condition the unequal participation of women in the public sphere. So the main goal in this research aims to understand how tasks are distributed at home among heterosexual couples in Spain and the Netherlands by forming profiles of who does what. Analyze a series of socio-demographic variables such as age, educational level, and employment status, as they are understood as relative resources that may affect the distribution of domestic activities. And the last one, analyze the connection between the private sphere, the profiles, and the public sphere, work and salary, to see if the profiles can influence participation in paid work and salary. To achieve these proposed objectives, we will implement the following methodological strategy. One of the contributions of this research is the use of latent class analysis to identify profiles based on the distribution of domestic tasks carried out by the couple. Research on the sexual division of labor has mostly focused on how much is done through time use surveys, but has not paused to analyze who does what. This technique allows us to identify patterns based on the division of tasks. ESSP database, with data for Spain and the Netherlands, is used, and the variable used to create the profile is as follows. In the table 1, you can see in your home who takes care of the following tasks: laundry, take care of family members, small repairs at home, shops, household cleaning, preparing meals. And the option of answer is always you, usually you, both equal, usually partner, always partner, or a third person. The variable itself has been dummified to generate power profiles of those who perform the task themselves. It will be the number 1, or those done by others will be 0. Based on this classification, we can observe the latent class or groups that perform or don't perform various tasks to identify latent patterns. Okay, once the latent class were obtained, the profiles were cross-referenced with socio-demographic variables, main status, education, and age, to understand the characteristics of the individuals that make up these groups. And lastly, a series of linear regression were conducted with key variables: hours of paid work and income, to explore the relation between the domestic and public sphere. For example, if there is a relationship between who does what, will be the profiles, and the time spent on paid work or the salary. Well, the following table presents information about latent class marginal means. It shows the average values of continuous variables for each latent class, helping to describe the specific characteristic of the identified subgroups. The information in this table allows us to label the latent groups into manifest profiles, as the score for each task indicates if the task is performed personally or not. The lower the score, the less likely is that the task is performed, and vice versa. Okay, so the first table is data from Spain. We have identified 3 groups for women and 3 groups for men, based on what they do or they don't do. So the groups are labeled as follows. Group 1 is labeled corresponsable, as the majority of tasks are done equal by both. This profile looks for an egalitarian relationship and shared responsibility in domestic work. This first group is for women. The second group is labeled transitional, because women perform tasks personally and others are shared with their partner. This group is in a transition towards a model of equal distribution. And the third one is called traditional, as the tasks are performed personally. These women assume the domestic burden of their partner and represent high specialization roles within the couple. The analysis for men will be the second table. In the group one, it has been labeled moderate co-responsibility because it scores high on doing tasks equal by both, although it scores low on performing tasks personally. These men are moving towards a more egalitarian model of task distribution. They share some tasks while performing other personally, such as grocery, shopping, and cooking. The second group is called hegemonic, as the men don't perform any tasks personally except for repairs. This represents the traditional male role regarding the division of domestic labor. So a high specialization group, as it focuses only on traditional masculine household tasks.
So these are the machines.
Just repairs. This group just repairs things at home.
Clothing.
Yeah. And the third group has been labeled committed, as most tasks are performed personally. This group consists of men who challenge their gender role in the sexual division of labor, representing the lowest level of specialization. So this group of guys, they do everything. They do everything at home. Yeah. Data for Netherlands. We have obtained 3 profiles for women and 4 profiles for men. The profiles for women are very similar those in Spain. The number 1 is called co-responsible as well because they don't perform tasks personally but share them with their partner. They do all, they share. Group number 2 is called transitional because although they perform some tasks personally, such as laundry or cleaning the house, they share others with the partner. And the third group is called traditional because they assume the burden of household personally. In the case of men, the other table, the analysis show 4 profiles. The first one has been labeled hegemonic. It consists of men who do not prefer any personal tasks except for repairs. This is a traditional profile with high level of specialization. The second group is called moderately co-responsible because they don't do tasks personally but share some with their partner, such as shopping or cooking. However, it's the partner who performs the majority of the task. The third group is called moderately participative. These men take on tasks like shopping and cooking personally. And the fourth group is called committed, consisting of those men who perform tasks personally. According to this result, we can find some similarities and differences. In the case of women, 3 groups differ by the unequal distribution of domestic work, from a more specialized group, traditional, to one that looks for greater equality by avoiding specialization. In the case of men, there are 2 groups of high specialization and one that is more committed to household tasks. There are 2 groups of high specialization and one that is more committed. The difference between men and women are that in the case of women, the distribution of individuals in each group is more homogeneous, with similar percentage in each group, than in the case of men, where individuals tend to concentrate in the less egalitarian groups. We can see this in the follow table. Okay, table 4 presents information about latent class marginal probabilities, which refer to the probabilities that an individual belongs to a specific latent class. So we can see the relative size of each class. This first slide is data for Spain. In this case, in the first table is woman. There is a higher probability of being in the traditional group, 43%, compared to other groups. For men, the highest probability is being in the hegemonic group, which is 66% of probability to belong to that group, with only 3% in the committed group. The data shows that for women, the probabilities of being in one group or another are more evenly distributed, while for men, they are concentrated in the hegemonic and the moderately co-responsibility profiles. Women seem to move towards more egalitarian models, while men are still predominantly in more traditional profiles, with a great specialization of tasks by gender. In the case of Netherlands, for women, the profiles are evenly distributed without concentration on the traditional profile. In the case of men, the highest probability is concentrated in the more traditional groups, the hegemonic and moderately co-responsible profiles, which are the ones with less participation in domestic tasks. This indicates 2 things. Women are shifting from a traditional profile to more egalitarian profile, while men predominantly remain in profiles where they don't personally participate in housework. Thus, in both countries, the profile of men most involved in domestic matters represent just 3% of the sample of men in Spain and only 1% in Holland, a figure that could be greatly improved. Additionally, we observe difference between countries. In the Netherlands, women show more homogeneous profiles than in Spain and are closer to less specialized profiles. So, about sociodemographic tables, Table 6 shows the relationship between the main status and the profiles by gender. And this relation is statistically significant. For women, those with more egalitarian profiles have the highest percent in paid employment and to a lesser extent in unemployment or homemakers. In the case of men, the traditional male profiles are concentrated in paid employment as well. Only the committed profile has a high percent of unemployment or retraining. In the case of the Netherlands, the relation between profiles and main status is also significant for both women and men. For women, the highest percent in all three profiles is in paid employment, but the traditional profile, there is a higher percent doing domestic work or being retried. In the case of men, two of the more traditional profiles, hegemonic and moderately participative, are primarily engaged in paid employment, while the more egalitarian profile committed is predominantly found in retirement. Okay, the relationship between education level and profile in Spain is significant for women, but not for men. For men, there is a correlation between a more egalitarian profile and higher education, while a more traditional profile is associated with elementary and secondary education. In the case of Netherlands, the relationship between profiles and education level is not significant. The level of education is independent of the distribution of domestic tasks in large couples. Okay, the last one shows the average age of the profiles in Spain. The relationship between age and profiles is significant for women, but not for men. This means that for women, the decision to do or not to do tasks is more related to age than for men. Women with the highest average age are in the traditional profile. For women, there are changes in the doing or not doing based on age, but this is not the case for men. Okay. Table 6, in the case of the Netherlands, the relation between profiles and age by gender is not significant. So the following tables show the average hours that the profiles dedicate to domestic work. The results for Spain show that women, on average, dedicate more hours to domestic work than men across all profiles. The most traditional female profile in domestic tasks spend an average of 30 hours per week on domestic work, while the most traditional profile in the Netherlands dedicates an average of 16 hours per week. In the Netherlands, men spend on average a similar amount of time as women. It might seem that Dutch men dedicate more time to domestic work than Spanish men, but there's not a great difference in the hours spent on domestic work per week among the male profiles in both countries. It seems that the change is occurring among women in the Netherlands, who have reduced the hours of domestic work, while men have not increased the number of hours dedicated to housework. In other words, the change lies in the reduction of hours for women in the Netherlands, rather than an increase in hours for men. Women are doing less, but men are not taking on the share of those vacant spaces. Now we show if there is a relationship between who does the task and how much is done through a linear regression analysis, where hours spent on domestic work is the dependent variable and the profiles are the independent variable. Okay, so hours and profiles. Data for Spain show that there is a statistical significant relationship between the profiles and the time spent on housework. For women, the most traditional profile spend more hours than the more egalitarian profile, which is the reference category. If we look at a standardized beta of traditional 0.44, it suggests a positive and strong effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable in the regression model. The analysis for men reveals that the more traditional profiles dedicate fewer hours than the more committed profile. The hegemonic profile is one that dedicates the less time to housework. It is important to note that this profile accounts for 75% of the male sample, while the committed profile represents only 3.5% of it. It means that only a low percent of men spend time doing housework. Next slide is data for the Netherlands. It reveals that among women, the traditional group is significant concerning the more egalitarian group, as they dedicate more time to domestic tasks. However, the transitional profile has not shown a significant difference regarding the corresponding profile. In the case of men, only the profiles that are most involved in domestic work, the committed and the moderate participative profiles, have been significant compared to the hegemonic group. These profiles dedicate more time to household work than the two more traditional profiles. Finally, to determine if there is a relation between the domestic sphere, which are the profiles, and the public sphere, we show the results of the different linear regression models that have been done. Relationship between income and profiles. Women profiles first. There is a statistical significant relation between the profiles and income. Those more traditional profiles have a lower income than the corresponding profile. On average, the transitional has decreased of 7.2 in their income compared to the reference group. So they earn less income than the corresponding profile, which is a more egalitarian profile. Women in the traditional group show 30.5 decrease in income compared to the corresponding group. This indicates that women in this traditional profile have significantly lower income than the corresponding group, and the difference is greater than in the transitional group. In contrast, in the case of men, there is no statistical significant relationship, which indicates that their domestic situation is independent of the income. So the following model explores the relationship between hours of paid work and the profiles in Spain. As in the previous model, the relationship is significant for all profiles among women. Those with a more traditional profile dedicate fewer hours to paid work than corresponding women. There is a connection between the private sphere, time and domestic dedication, and the public sphere, paid work and income. In men, only the commitment profile has been significant compared to the hegemonic profile. The commit profile dedicates fewer hours to paid work. As in the previous cases, there is a weaker connection between male profiles and paid work, especially for those not involved in domestic tasks. And the last model explores the relationship between hours of paid work and the profiles in the Netherlands. As in the previous analysis, there is a stronger relationship between hours of paid work and the profiles in the case of women, but not in the case of men, especially in the case of the traditional profile of women compared to the more egalitarian. In the case of men, the only relationship observed is between the profile most engaged in domestic work and a lower number of paid work hours. In the other male profiles, there is no relationship between the domestic sphere and the public sphere. Well, the main conclusion is that, first one, in both countries, men maintain a highly specialized profiles in the household, while women are moving toward more egalitarian and less specialized roles at home. Women's profiles appears to be shifting toward less traditional models at home. In contrast, men's profiles account for the largest percent of cases in more traditional male roles in the household. Women in Spain continue to take on more domestic workload than men, and women in Netherlands spend fewer hours on domestic work than in Spain. But men in the Netherlands dedicate a similar amount of time to household tasks as men in Spain. So what's happening? It's not that there has been a change in men, who on average dedicate the same hours as men in Spain, but rather a change in women, empty spaces that remain unfilled. Women with partners in the Netherlands spend the same amount of time or less on household tasks than men. Have they decided to do less? And the last conclusion is that there is a stronger connection between the private and public spheres for women than for men. For women, traditional gender roles represent an obstacle to their engagement in the public sphere. resulting in fewer hours of paid work and lower salaries, compared to women with less traditional roles at home. And finally, for men, no relationship is observed between their participation in the private sphere and the public sphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for a lot of presentation in a small amount of time. I can imagine there will be some questions here in the room and also online. Shall we begin?
Just
yeah.